to 3 on 3 Blazers. I am Nate Hanson alongside Jared Cowley. Our producer Max Barr is back on the 1s and 2s. And our man Orlando Sanchez is not with us today. We sent him to Atlanta. He was part of the Evan Turner trade, right?
Oh, that's really sad.
No.
No, his mom is in town.
I know. He told me that. Yeah, so
shout out to Orlando's mom.
Yeah, hopefully she was listening to the podcast with whatever they're doing right now today. It's her first time in Portland, too. And I said, wow, you brought her on like the one day it's raining in the summer is when she's coming to town.
Yeah, it never rains
in the summer. It's not something that happens often. But so it'll just be Jared and me, for the most part, wheeling through this podcast. We will probably get some input from Max, more so than usual.
Yes, please.
For the Rip It fans out there will not be any Rip It at the end of this podcast, but please stick with us.
Rip It is on summer vacation.
Yes, it is. Hey, that's good. I like that.
Thanks.
But, we talked last week going into the NBA draft, and usually around this time of the year, we don't have a ton to talk about, usually maybe just a draft pick.
Yeah.
But it seems like, with the timing of the draft and then the Evan Turner trade and free agency nowadays, just days away, it seems like there's a lot to talk about in Rip City.
I think it's more than probably most Blazers fans expected to have happen before free agency even got underway.
Absolutely. And so let's jump into this. You know how it goes. 3 questions, 3 answers. You can read our answers on KGW.com, including Orlando's answers.
Yes.
So if you are really interested in what he has to say, go check that out on KGW.com. Okay, the first question. Let's start with the NBA draft a week ago now. What are your thoughts on the Blazers' first-round draft selection, North Carolina forward Nassir Little at pick number 25? Jared.
Didn't you think that going into the NBA draft that it was kind of going to be a boring night?
Yes.
That most likely, I thought that the Blazers were probably going to trade that pick for a couple second-round picks, and maybe even future second-round picks, so they wouldn't pick anyone.
That seemed to be where a lot of people were thinking based on the type of players that they had come in and work out for them.
Yeah, so I wasn't expecting anything that interesting to happen, and something really interesting happened because legitimately one of the most talented players in the draft inexplicably fell about 15 spots to where he was available for Portland to pick him.
No.
And leading up to the draft and all the final mock drafts that were out there, the major mock drafts, he was in the lottery in every single mock draft from pick 9 I think was the highest he was down to about 13. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you see lottery talent like that slip in the draft, there's usually red flags. You saw that with Bol. He had plenty of red flags that made him drop. But there are no red flags for Nassir Little. You could point to he didn't shoot that well as a freshman at North Carolina and didn't have as good a season as many expected his freshman year. But even then, there's no red flags. There are no character issues. There's no injury concerns.
No work ethic concerns.
Yeah, no work ethic concerns. So for some reason, this guy just slipped, and we don't know why, but the Blazers were fortunate enough to, one, recognize that because a lot of other teams kept passing on him. Mm-hmm. And the Blazers, as soon as they were able to get him, they went and got him. And I think probably a lot of Blazers fans didn't know a lot about Nassir Little before the Blazers picked him.
No. If you were, and for good reason, because if you were reading, Blazer-specific draft preview stuff, there was no reason for him to be mentioned in those because of the fact that, as you talked about, he was expected to be a lottery pick. Exactly.
And even if you're a college basketball fan, unless you were a big North Carolina fan, you probably saw him play, but he wasn't even a starter for North Carolina, so most probably weren't that familiar with him, but Blazers fans surely know a lot about him now. He was the only player other than LeBron James to be named MVP of both the McDonald's All-American Game and the Jordan Brand Classic. He was the second-ranked player in his high school class by 247 Sports cumulative rankings. He drew comparisons going into the draft to Andre Iguodala and Jaylen Brown. We know he had an up-and-down freshman season at North Carolina. Even with that, he was still a projected lottery pick, and somehow he's now a Blazer. So to get a player like that, a lottery talent who knows how he'll pan out, but he certainly has the potential and the upside to turn into a top-notch starting small forward, and to get a pick like that at 25, That's tremendous value for the Blazers.
And I'm completely on the same page here with you. I don't know how a Blazer fan could have walked away from that draft on Thursday night and been disappointed and said, how did the Blazers not do more or do better? Because, getting a lottery-type talent at number 25, as you said, most people were expecting that if they probably wouldn't even use that pick, and that they would trade back into the second round. In the second round, you're definitely not getting a player with the talent level of Nassir Little.
Yeah.
And so for them, as you said, to be able to get lottery talent at the end of the first round, that's the best you could hope for as an organization and as a fan of that team. When you're picking that late in the first round, we talked about this last week. We talked for 30 minutes last week about the NBA draft, and not once did we bring up Nassir Little's name because he wasn't supposed to be there at 25.
He was not on my radar at all.
But of the guys we talked about, we said mostly you're looking for someone who has a certain skill set that you can bank and count on, and then other parts of their game that you think you can develop in your system so that in 2 or 3 years from now, they can become part of your rotation.
Right.
Like Jake Layman is a perfect example of that. And those were the type of guys we were talking about. Well, you got that with Nassir Little. You got a guy who definitely, the raw talent is definitely there. He's got an NBA body. He's 6'6", 225. And if he ends up being anything like Andre Iguodala or Jaylen Brown, the two guys you just mentioned, then this is a home run pick for the Blazers at 25. And for the Blazers, if you want to look back at the last couple drafts, one thing in terms of value in the first round is they have seemed to have gotten really good value with the picks they've made in the first round over the last couple of years. 2 years ago, the jury is still out on who Zach Collins will end up being as an NBA player. But you certainly haven't given up on him yet after 2 seasons. There's no reason to do that.
I think a lot of Blazers fans think he'll be the starting power forward this year.
Exactly. And so that's who you got number 10 actually in the lottery 2 years ago. But you have to remember that was still a team that made the playoffs and was able to get a lottery pick and select Zach Collins last year. Once again, they made the playoffs. So you're picking late in the first round, and they get Anthony Simons, who a lot of people said may have been a top 10 prospect if he had actually played in college instead of just playing at IMG Academy. So they go and get him, and we're hearing great things about Anthony Simons a year later. And so now, once again, you make the playoffs, you make the Western Conference Finals, you're picking late in the first round, and you get, once again, it seems, another lottery-type player. So this seems to be a trend for Neil Olshey and for the Blazers of identifying high-end talent that has a certain skill set that you can bank on and then trying to develop it through your system. And people rave about the Blazers culture, both within the organization and outside the organization. We heard Kent Bazemore talk about it during his introductory press conference, how other players view Portland as an organization. So get Nassir Little into this culture, into this organization. Get Anthony Simons. Get these lottery-talented players in here and develop them. And like we said, we're hearing great things about Anthony Simons, and I think Nassir Little could totally fit that bill once again.
I agree. How early do you think Blazers fans can anticipate Nassir Little contributing to this team?
The earliest would be not this upcoming season, but the following season.
So the 2020 season?
Yeah, well, I think would be the earliest. More likely, probably 2 seasons from now. But again, we're hearing it's always tough to judge because of A, do you feel a need on the team? And Nassir Little definitely fills the need for the Blazers. They need depth at forward and probably will after this upcoming season when maybe Maurice Harkless and Al-Farouq Aminu may not be on the team anymore. And so you're going to need guys to fill that role. So maybe that could help get him into the rotation a bit earlier if he's ready. But I think the most likely case is, like most of these draft picks, 2 years from now.
Yeah.
But you did get a guy at 25. I don't know if we would be saying that about the guys we talked about last week.
You would have thought 2 to 3 years
Yeah,
ahead,
exactly. We wouldn't be saying maybe those guys could be ready next year. Nassir Little has the talent where you could conceivably see he could find himself in the rotation a year from now.
Yeah, and I think something that's interesting about Nassir Little is physically he's already ready to play in the NBA. He has the size. He's not going to have to put on weight or strength or anything like that. He's already got that. So I think that puts him a little bit ahead of maybe where you'd expect, where if the the rough parts of his game right now, if he's able to improve those quickly, he could be a contributor sooner than you'd think.
And one thing about Nassir Little is his whole life he's been told how great he is. You're one of the best. You're one of the best. You're one of the best. And this kind of, with North Carolina this past season, and now falling to number 25 in the NBA draft, is kind of the first time where he's probably heard people tell him, you're not the best in the game. So now he's got not only the talent, but a little chip on his shoulder, which everyone in Portland knows.
That's a Blazers thing.
That's definitely a Blazers thing. So before we move on to the second question, Max, Nassir Little, yay, nay, super yay?
I'm in, yeah, for all the reasons you guys mentioned. And I'll just add that ESPN's Ryan Russillo, after the draft, reported that he talked to somebody, I'm assuming it was Olshey, in the Blazers organization, and they told him they had Little 12th on their board, on their big board. So, steal.
Yeah, I agree. A couple things I just wanted to point out about Nassir Little. A lot of people have talked about probably his main weakness is outside shooting. He shot about 27% from the three-point line as a freshman at North Carolina. But he did that on a very low volume. He only took 52 three-pointers last season. And if he had made just 5 more three-pointers, then he'd be shooting 38%.
Yeah.
So scouts have said he has really good form, good mechanics. He doesn't have any weird hitch on his release or anything like that. And I don't know why it is this way, and if studies didn't prove it to be true, I probably wouldn't believe it. But apparently free throw percentage is a better indicator of three-point shooting success in the pros than three-point shooting percentage when you're in college. And he was a good free throw shooter. He shot about 77%. So I don't think that we need to look at him as that he is going to be this really good defensive forward who can't shoot, kind of like some of the Blazers' small forwards we have now. I think that he can develop into a good outside shooter.
I agree with that. So let's move on to number 2. What are your thoughts on the Blazers' trade of Evan Turner for Kent Bazemore? Kind of took all of Rip City, I think, a little bit by surprise, right?
It did me. I want to hear your take. I went first last time.
Okay. Well, I think it's a positive move for Portland. How big of a positive? I think I'm more on the minor end than this is a big upgrade for Portland. They obviously, to me, like most people, win this deal, because Kent Bazemore has proven he can be a consistent three-point shooter, career 35%, that's respectable. He certainly gives them some versatility in terms of playing the 2 or the 3. And, Evan Turner, just his skill set, as good of a guy as he was in the locker room, as beloved as he was by his teammates, they would probably even tell you his skill set just did not mesh with this team. And the Blazers have, in the front office, has shown, especially recently, that they're out trying to get shooters to go alongside Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum. And Kent Bazemore is a shooter. And so he can fill that need for Portland. And by all accounts, from people who covered Bazemore in Atlanta, he's also a good defender, which is something Portland needs. And he's also a good locker room guy. So if you're worried about chemistry and how this trade affects the locker room, by all accounts, it seems like Kent Bazemore should be able to slide in and be a good locker room guy as well, which is important in this organization. Now, just beyond this trade, to me, my biggest takeaway from this trade was that the Blazers probably won't be able to re-sign Rodney Hood, and that they believe they probably won't be able to. Neil Olshey even briefly touched on that in the introductory press conference. He basically said, Rodney Hood may be too expensive for us, and therefore we need to get shooters on this team, and Kent Bazemore is a shooter who helps fill this role for us. And so that was kind of my biggest takeaway from the trade, is that looking forward with this team, because I always thought maybe you could get Rodney Hood on that mid-level exception. And you've been telling me this whole time that, no, he outplayed that. But now, you got Neil Olshey admitting publicly that the Blazers don't feel like they'll probably be able to keep him. And so for me, that was the biggest takeaway. But in terms of the trade itself, it is an upgrade for the Blazers.
Yeah, I agree. I think that on the court, I think in the locker room, it's probably a push. I think that the reports you get out of Atlanta from writers who cover the team is that he is a really good leader, not only in the locker room, but also in the community. So I think that the Blazers aren't taking a step back there. And I think on the court, he's just a better fit, and probably a better player than Evan Turner as well. And we talk all the time about what the Blazers need. It's 3 and D wings, and he is a 3 and D wing. He shot 32% from three last season, and that's not a good percentage, but he's a 35% shooter for his career, and he does that on a high volume. He averages about 5 three-point attempts per game over his career. And so you have a guy who's going to stretch the defense because defenders will know that he's going to take that shot, and that a lot of times he will make it. And just 2 seasons ago, he shot 39% from three. Last season was interesting because he was having the best season of his career up until he got a bad ankle sprain that kept him out about a month at the end of December. And after he came back, he lost his starting position to Kevin Herter, the rookie for the Hawks, while he was injured. And he went through this 2-month slump. And so that's why his stats from last season don't look quite as good. But I think that he's a player who can come in and really be a strong contributor, whether he moves into the starting lineup, in place of Maurice Harkless, or whether he's, one of their main reserves. And so it's a really good trade. It's a very smart trade. Like you said, it's not like it's a home run or anything like that.
No.
But when you have to look at a trade and look at what's going out versus what you're bringing back in, and for them to get someone like Kent Bazemore for Evan Turner and not have to add another asset like a draft pick or something like that, to me, it just seems like a great trade.
Can I ask you one question? Because in terms of, say, the Blazers can't keep Rodney Hood.
Yeah.
So say Kent Bazemore is essentially the replacement for Rodney Hood. Is that an upgrade, even a minor one? Do you think Kent Bazemore is a better player than Rodney Hood?
I think it's comparable.
Yeah.
I liked Rodney Hood, but he was really inconsistent. And I think Bazemore is less inconsistent than he is. I think that they're pretty close as far as outside shooting. Hood's maybe a little bit better. But Bazemore, even though Hood is taller, Bazemore has that crazy wingspan, 7-foot wingspan.
You love wingspan. I've learned this over the last week or two. Jared's a big fan of wingspan.
Do you play defense with your head?
No.
No, you play defense with your hands and your arms. So your wingspan and your standing reach is what matters.
Yeah.
How tall you are doesn't really matter. That's why I love Anthony Simons.
Yeah.
He can play both guard spots. He's 6'4", but he has a 6'9" wingspan.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got off on a little tangent.
That's
there.
okay. I love it, man.
I do love wingspan.
Max is smiling right now.
But I think he's a better defender than Rodney Hood.
Yeah.
And I think he can guard more positions than Rodney Hood can. I think he can guard 1 through 3 and even some small ball 4s. He's a really versatile player. And talking about his defense, I compared some advanced defensive analytics for him and Harkless, because I think Harkless is a really good defensive small forward. So defensive box score plus minus. And that's basically, I'll just read what it is here. It's a box score estimate of the defensive points per 100 possessions a player contributes above a league average player. And over the past 4 years, the average for Bazemore is 1.0, which is good. Anything above 0 is good. Harkless is 1.1, so almost exactly the same. Defensive win shares, which is the estimate of the number of wins a player contributes with his defense to a team's win total. Over the past 4 years, Bazemore 2.5 per season, Harkless 1.7.
Okay.
So that shows Bazemore's a really good defensive player.
So you're saying, in a best case scenario here for Portland with this trade, they may have gotten a guy who shoots comparable to Rodney Hood, but also brings Maurice Harkless type defense to that position as well, which frankly Rodney Hood just did not bring.
Yeah, best case scenario, if Bazemore's at his best, I think that's accurate.
And the other aspect of this too is, while he's here right now, he's also on a 1-year expiring large contract. So there is the possibility that he could always be moved during the season if a deal is out there for the Blazers that they think would upgrade the team even more. One thing you said at the very beginning of this that I want to go back to is, and I think is a good point, is it's not a home run trade.
No.
But the Blazers aren't going to be making home run moves this offseason. They just don't have the capabilities to do so. So what are you looking for? You're looking for minor upgrades. And this is a pretty good team anyways. They did reach the Western Conference Finals last season. So you're looking just, with the limited capability they have, just find places where you can be a little bit better and chip away here and there. And I think this trade is one of those moves where you chipped a little bit away and you're a little bit better than you were if you had still had Evan Turner.
Yeah, and I think Neil O'Shea has proven that in the draft and in making these small incremental moves, he's a very talented GM.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to maybe stop the criticism of Neil O'Shea.
For the
And
time
it's-
being.
Yeah, no, I mean, overall, I
Yeah.
think if you look at his general track record, he's a good GM.
No.
And a very vocal contingent of Blazers fans don't feel that way, and that's fine. But if we judge him so harshly for the contracts that he signed in the summer of 2016. But if you look at what he's done since then, I mean, going back to February of 2017, if you look at what he's sent out,
Mason
Plumlee
for Nurk and a first-round pick.
for Nurk and a first-round pick.
That you're able to use to go up and get Zach
to go
Collins.
get Zach Collins. He drafted Anthony Simons last year. He drafted Nassir Little this year. He traded Evan Turner for Kent Bazemore. He traded Caleb Swanigan, a first-round pick who didn't work out, for Scal Lavissiere, who is an interesting prospect. I'm sure I'm missing some, but it seems like he's made a lot of these small incremental moves.
Seth Curry.
Yeah, he signed Seth Curry. That was a good value signing.
Ennis Cantor and
Signed
Rodney
Ennis
Hood.
Cantor, traded for Rodney Hood. And even the signing last year of Nick Stauskas.
Low
He
risk.
turned into Rodney Hood.
Yeah,
They used Nick Stauskas and Wade Baldwin to go get Rodney Hood.
that's a good point.
I think that we need to give Neil O'Shea the credit he deserves right now.
And I mean, we go back to that summer of 2016, which is undeniably a bad summer in
Yes.
terms of free agent spending for the Blazers. But Neil O'Shea, to his credit, has been good enough since then that he's been able to keep his job now 3 years later, removed from that summer, and may get another offseason next offseason where he essentially gets a redo with this team to try to get them to that next level. But going back to the trade, Max, your thoughts?
Thoughts on Bazemore?
Yes.
I think it's a minor upgrade with major upside.
Okay.
The efficiency does concern me a bit, but as Jared mentioned, Bazemore is an excellent defender. He was in the top 30 for deflections in the league last year.
That
Yeah.
wingspan right there.
Yeah, there's your wingspan, and averaged 2 steals and a block. You know I love steals and blocks per 36
I
minutes.
can't wait for the Rip It questions next year regarding
So-
steals and blocks and Bazemore.
He could
Yeah, me
be.
too. That would be awesome.
Woo!
He could be a big upgrade, but for now, I mean, I think at the very least it's a significant upgrade.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You ready to move on to the last one here?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's do it. Number 3, free agency starts in, 4 days, 3 days from now?
Sunday afternoon.
Sunday afternoon. So what do you anticipate for the Blazers over the next month in free agency and potential trades?
Well, let's start with what Neil O'Shea said during yesterday's press conference. He said, do not expect fireworks on July 1st. So Blazers fans,
He's
don't
talking to you,
expect
bloggers.
fireworks
Yeah.
on July 1st. Yeah. The Blazers have limited capability to improve this team through free agency. They have $5.7 million on a taxpayer mid-level exception that they can spend, and then they have minimum contracts that they can give to players. And this market, there's so much money in the market this offseason. It's a lot like 2016. And so the Blazers are going to have to be patient. Most likely, you're going to see a lot of players sign really big contracts for the first few days of free agency.
There will probably be a few head scratchers in that
Yes,
mix.
there will be, assuredly.
Yeah.
But I think if the Blazers are patient, they might be able to get some value as the money dries up, and there are some players still out there because there are a lot of free agents this year as well. But I do think it starts with Al-Farouq Aminu.
Okay.
And it's really hard to know where the Blazers stand with him and how much they value him. I don't know. I mean, there's the viewpoint and the perspective that you can't lose a rotation player, a starter, for nothing. And if they let him walk, that's what they'd be doing. But I thought the same thing about Ed Davis last year. He was a really valuable rotation player, and they just let him go and didn't even try and re-sign him. Jason Quick said on the radio yesterday that Al-Farouq Aminu's agent is looking at Aminu getting a contract that starts at between 10 and 14 million per year. I think if it gets that rich, the Blazers let him walk.
Oh, yeah.
And I just don't think that you can pay that much money for someone who you probably don't look at as a long-term starter at power forward. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. I think, like we talked about, I think Ennis Cantor, Rodney Hood, and Seth Curry, I think they're all going to be priced out of Portland's range. I think they're all going to get above the taxpayer mid-level. There's a chance that their market could dry up, one of those players, and they could come back on a one-year prove-it deal with the Blazers, but I don't think that's likely. So then the Blazers go bargain shopping, and I think they're looking for outside shooting, either at backup point guard or backup power forward, and maybe with one of their minimum contracts, they try and go get a veteran center who can fill some of those minutes until Yusuf Nurkic comes back. But I think that's what you should expect in free agency.
Yeah, just minor moves. And I'm completely in agreement with you on Al-Farouq Aminu, too. I think it's the biggest wild card for the Blazers, the biggest unknown. Because as you said, we're pretty confident Seth Curry, Rodney Hood, and Enes Kanter will not be back with Portland because their price value is going to be too much for the Blazers to keep them around. So in that sense, if they do leave Portland, it's not going to come as a surprise at all. It would actually come as a surprise if one of them is able to stay with the Blazers. But with Al-Farouq Aminu, we don't really have a guide as to where he stands with the Blazers, where the Blazers stand with him. We know Neil Olshey when he likes guys, he likes them.
Yeah.
And Al-Farouq Aminu has been a Neil Olshey guy.
From the beginning.
Picked him with the Clippers, and they brought him over here to Portland. And so I wonder how much Neil Olshey still feels that way about Al-Farouq Aminu, given the circumstance the Blazers find themselves in. Because you talked about a $10 to $14 million a year deal, and I would assume that's multiple years on that deal as well. And if that's the case, to me, if I'm the general manager, I'm saying thank you very much for the last couple of years. Good luck.
We'll cheer for you every time you come back to Portland.
Good luck with your next team. There's no way I am paying Al-Farouq Aminu that much money for that many years, just because as much as he does do the little things and the dirty things that Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum praise him for, he is limited. And we saw that in this past postseason. In the Golden State series, he completely disappeared for Portland. And you can't have that out of a starter trying to get where the Blazers are trying to go right now.
Right.
They're one of these teams trying to not just get to the Western Conference Finals, they're trying to get to the NBA Finals and win the NBA title this upcoming season because the Warriors, for the first time, are vulnerable. And so, because of that, I don't think Al-Farouq Aminu will be back with the Blazers. How do you feel? Do you think he'll be back?
I can't shake the feeling that he will not be back.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to, like you said, Neil Olshey drafted him. He brought him here.
There's no team.
You know that he loves Aminu, but it feels a lot like Ed Davis last year.
Yeah.
Ed Davis was a high-energy, good defensive player, good rebounder, valuable player in the locker room. All of those things, you could say the exact same things about Al-Farouq Aminu. But what was the one thing that Ed Davis couldn't do? He couldn't shoot an outside jumper at all.
Yeah.
And Aminu has had moments where he's been able to hit the outside shot, but he's never been consistent, and he's not an outside threat that defenses respect.
Yeah.
It just feels like Ed Davis. I just feel like they're going to let him walk.
I feel the same way, but as we said, what makes this so interesting is we don't have any indication from either side about where this is going to go here over the next week. The other thing, I think, to me that's interesting about free agency is what position do the Blazers use that mid-level exception on?
Yeah.
Do they use it to get another shooter like a Rodney Hood type player? Do they use it to get a backup point guard or who could also play the two? Do they use it to get a backup big man who can play the 4 or 5? Because to me, whatever they choose to do with that shows a lot about how they feel about the young players on their roster.
Yeah.
If they don't go and try to get a backup guard, or even with veteran minimums, if it's not something they address trying to get a backup point guard or backup 2 guard, it shows you they feel really good about Anthony Simons. And they're obviously expecting him to play next year. And not just sparingly. They're expecting him to come in and play and give minutes every night.
Yeah.
If they don't do anything to address the 4 or 5 position during this free agency period, that shows they're putting their eggs in Zach Collins. And Myers Leonard, to an extent, at that point.
And Skal Labissiere. Because those are the only 3 big men they have
probably,
right now.
Definitely Zach Collins, they're saying, we feel he's ready probably to be a starter at that point, especially if Aminu's gone as well. And they're saying we trust Myers Leonard enough that we think he can produce during the time Nurkic is out and keep us afloat until Nurkic comes back, essentially. And at the wing position, if they do go and use this mid-level exception on a guy who's a 3-and-D type player, or specifically a 3-point shooter, that shows you how much value they're placing on both Anthony Simons and Zach Collins, and how much value they're placing on outside shooting right now to go with C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard. So to me, it'll be really interesting to see what position they decide to use that mid-level exception on.
Yeah, I think, to me, it's undeniable that they are looking to have Anthony Simons be a major part of the rotation next year.
Yeah.
Every year it seems like during the summer leading up to the upcoming season at Media Day, Neil O'Shea always has one player that he singles out as someone that's had a great summer, looks a lot better, and most of the time he's been right. 2 years ago it was Shabazz Napier, and Shabazz had a good season.
Right.
Last year it was Jake Layman, and Jake Layman exceeded most
That's true.
expectations. And this year, he's talking about Anthony Simons as the most talented player he has ever drafted.
Yeah, that's high praise.
So I think it's undeniable that they're going to give Anthony Simons the first shot at all of those backup guard minutes.
Yeah.
I still think they could go get a backup veteran point guard
Yeah.
that in case Anthony Simons isn't up to the challenge yet, then they have someone to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they desperately need to get at least depth at big man, because you only have 3 big men right now.
I agree.
And I think that they need at least one more veteran center to fill some of those minutes, because they're just the minutes available. But if Al-Farouq Aminu leaves, if they let him go, I think that, like you said, I think that is an indicator that they believe Zach Collins is ready to start for the team next season.
And if they believe that, then they definitely need to go out and get some depth at the big man position.
Yeah.
Because at that point, you're lying. I mean, you just said they have 3 players. If now you're inserting one of them as your starting 4,
Yeah.
then you've got to go and get help there to kind of like I said, just keep it afloat until Yusuf Nurkic could come back.
Yeah.
Max, before we go, are there any players that you have been on your mind over the last month that you think, man, that guy would look good in a Blazers jersey, that could actually play for the Blazers this next
No, I do think it's likely that whoever they sign, the casual fans will react and say, this person hasn't done anything lately.
Yeah.
Or who is this guy?
Right.
Because that's what O'Shea does.
Mm-hmm.
Seth Curry,
Yeah.
injured the whole previous year.
Nick
Stauskas. So I think that's kind of the mold. That's what I expect. I could be wrong. But I'm excited for the possibility of Simon's season.
Me too.
I'm on board. He changed his number to number 1.
The
Turn him loose.
You have the letter O in the number 1.
Right, and it wasn't just O'Shea you talking about. Dame Lillard was talking
Yeah.
about big time at the exit interview, right? He
Right.
said, you guys are going to be talking to him first when I'm on my way out of here.
Yeah.
So,
If you listen to the beat writers who are around the team the most, they talk about how it's not just O'Shea, it's not even just Lillard, it's all the players, it's the veterans on the team, it's the coaches. They all talk behind the scenes about how Anthony Simons is a star in the making. And I was thinking about the last time I remember there being that kind of chatter behind the scenes that the beat writers would share just, hey, this is what they said. It was Jermaine O'Neal. Way back in the day before they traded him for Dale Davis. He would dominate practices. And then you saw what happened after they traded him.
Multi-time
he blew
All-Star.
up in Indiana, yeah.
Great
And so
player.
that's the last time I can remember this kind of talk about a player that wasn't getting a lot of playing time, just dominating practice, and it's going to be really interesting to see what Anthony Simons can do.
I mean, just the buzz makes for a little bit more excitement right now, too, for this team during a time where we didn't think there would be necessarily a ton of excitement because of the fact the Blazers are going to be losing probably a bunch of key pieces from last year's team that did get into the Western Conference Finals. Before we go, Max, Aminu, is he a Blazer next season?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't really see how he could really get better at
Yeah.
this point in his career. Also, remember what he did in the playoffs? Not much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was played off the court in that Denver series, basically. And he played well against OKC, but
Yeah,
I just
agree.
don't see it. I don't see it.
So the three of us, it's a clean sweep. And I think
Orlando feels the same way, too. I don't know if he wrote anything about it.
I mean, Jared and I talked with Orlando for quite a bit yesterday and about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say Orlando is on the side that the three of us are on, that at the right price, it would be great to have him around for another year. But ultimately, we don't think that that's going to be... We think he's going to have something better out there for him that the Blazers won't want to match.
Part of being a good GM is knowing when to
say
move
goodbye.
on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's touch on one more topic before we wrap up.
Okay.
Every Blazers fan out there I think, is looking ahead to the next, either this offseason or in the next year or 8 months, the potential of a big trade to bring in a star to pair with Dame, CJ, and Nurk.
Yes.
Do you think that will happen this offseason? 2, do you think it will happen, if it doesn't happen this offseason, do you think that will happen before the 2020 trade deadline in February?
No to the first question. I don't think it will happen this offseason unless we hear suddenly a player is suddenly unhappy somewhere. You know, because you need a player to want out in order for a star player to be traded. And right now,
there's none of that right now.
There's none of that right now, and people will talk about Kevin Love because he's with Cleveland.
But there are no actual reports out there.
There are no reports out there of it, and I feel like if that were to happen, it would have happened before the draft and before we get into free agency.
Yeah.
And so, given that it hasn't, I'm going to say no in the offseason. Right now, I don't know who it's going to be. It's hard to predict the NBA, weeks from now, much less months from now. But I'm going to say yes, it does happen by the end of the trade deadline. I've been a big proponent that the Blazers team next season will be a lot like it was last season, that the team at the end of the season playing in the playoffs will look very different than the team that starts the season. And I think they will make a move with those expiring contracts and maybe a young player or two or future picks to go and get a star who someone's going to be available.
Yes.
It happens every
year. You never know who it's going to be. You don't know
who it's going to be.
Someone's always
Someone's going to be available. Jared said a name in my ear yesterday that I haven't been able to get out of my head because Jared brought up Blake Griffin yesterday in Detroit as a possible guy who could maybe be available come February.
I've got one more for you, and I don't know if he's a perfect
These are completely
fit.
hypothetical, by the way. People.
Total speculation. Bradley Beal.
Great player.
He could be the next star player, one of the next star players to want out of his current situation.
Yeah. I mean, to me, he'd have to be able to play the
He'd
3.
have to be able to play the 3, and he's a shooting guard. But
so that's and I like Bradley Beal a lot, but I just don't think the fit for Portland is there. I think the fit for Blake Griffin, that kind of player, is there. So
I agree with you.
No in the offseason, yes at the deadline.
I don't think that's going to happen in the off. I mean, it could. You never know. But I really think that that's going to happen. I think that that's what Neil Shea has been building towards. Kind of like, and this isn't a great example because Danny Ainge failed at it, but he had been building for years to get Anthony Davis, and everything kind of fell apart for him, and it didn't happen. But I think Neil Shea has been looking to these expiring contracts that he now has that are valuable in assets and building other assets. The Blazers have control of all of their first-round picks going forward. They have these very interesting young players in Zach Collins, Anthony Simons, Nassir Little, Gary Trent Jr.
that they're able to get
you
despite
can take
continuing making the playoffs all those years.
Now the Blazers have the pieces where if there is a star player available, they have what you need to go get a player like that. They have expiring contracts, they have interesting young talent, and they have draft picks. So I think it's going to happen. Max?
Yeah, I mean,
I think it definitely could happen.
Here,
I think it depends on how the team is doing during the season.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to happen during this off season. I don't think they're going to get a player like Love or Griffin. But if it's a tight race or something next season, and Houston's struggling or the Warriors are kind of out of it, and they kind of see the conference for the taking, I think it could happen. But it's a long way off.
It is. The NBA, a month ago when the start of the NBA Finals, we were talking about how the Warriors were going to, ease through the finals.
Yeah.
Maybe they lose Kevin Durant, but they'll be just fine with Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Klay Thompson. And then we all saw about 10 days later how all that broke down for the Warriors and how it completely changed the landscape of the NBA itself. So if Max is right,
Who knows?
It's hard to know. But
what are these West teams going to look like after free agency?
But it's fun to talk about. That's and that's as much what the NBA is about, is talking about these possibilities.
If Seth Curry walks, I would love it if he somehow wound up on the Warriors with his brother.
That'd be
I think
awesome.
That'd be so much fun.
That would be fun.
I'm rooting for that.
Except for that means the Warriors are better. Which is if you're a Blazers fan, that hurts the Blazers.
Other teams are going to get better.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of teams have improved over the past 2 off seasons, and Blazers fans lament, why aren't the Blazers making moves like these other teams to get better? But the Blazers were the team that was in the Western Conference Finals last year, so I think we should trust in what Dame and CJ can do together and what Neil O'Shea can do to build the roster around them.
And obviously, they're doing something right.
Yes.
All right, before we go, Max, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Max N Bar. Yeah.
You can find me at Jared Cowley.
You can find me at nhands_KGW. And Jared, where can people get the podcast?
Go to wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify. Search 3on3 Blazers and you will find it. Please subscribe. During the off season, we might be back next week if the Blazers make a move. We might not if they don't do anything. But during the off season, when we're not publishing every single week, if you subscribe, our podcast episodes will show up in your feed every single time we publish. So please subscribe, leave us 5-star ratings and reviews. Let us know what you think. We love the feedback.
We do, and 5-star ratings help other people find the podcast. So
Absolutely.
If you like it, please give it to us so other people can enjoy it too.
Yep.
And we'll probably talk to you next week after a couple days of free agency.
Probably.
See ya.